First of all, good afternoon, everybody. I have prepared a short presentation, so I'm now going to attempt to share it. So I hope that, can you see that?
Yep, yeah, very clear, yeah.
Okay, great. So I've over the next 15 minutes or so, I've prepared a short presentation with the focus of it being really how Queen's University Belfast has responded and continues to respond to the current kind of coronavirus situation that we see. We see kind of changing every day and every week. So I'm just going to go through a few points, and then obviously I'll be very happy to take some questions as well at the end. So I've kind of broken it down into a few small areas, and the first one to start with, I guess, is that Queen's has always maintained that the biggest priority for us has always been the safety and well-being of our students and our staff. So before we go through any of these changes, I guess we have to look at it in two different ways. That initially, when things started back in kind of February, March time, the number one priority was making changes to affect the current students that we had on campus. And then we had to also look forward to the students that were due to start with us in January and September to see what we could do for them. So one of the first things that Queen's introduced was we put in some additional and alternative start dates in January for some of our master's programs. And traditionally, Queen's has not had a January start date. But as we listened to the feedback coming in, and we realized that there was a demand, especially for the students coming in for a one-year master's program, that some students preferred to wait from September till January to start their program then. So within our three different faculty areas, it was always done slightly different in each faculty. But first of all, in the engineering and physical sciences faculty, a big decision was made to move a large number of programs from September to January. So we did not offer a lot of the programs starting in September. And that's mainly because, especially kind of lab-based and practical one-year programs have quite a big practical component. And we thought that actually if they start in January, it would increase the chance of being able to do the majority or all of the practical component of the course without too much disruption. So that's how it worked in engineering. And then in the arts, humanities, social sciences, in particularly for the management school, it was a slightly different approach that we offered two different start dates in September and January. And this gave people the flexibility to be able to defer if they wanted to, if they'd already applied for September, or in fact submit an application for a program that starts in January. People felt a little bit more confident some of the time to start in January than September. Now in the medical faculty, there was a slightly different move there that a lot of the programs did have an additional start date, but there was one program in particular, the pharmacy and the industrial pharmaceutics program, where they decided it doesn't really work feasibly to start the program in January, but actually we will postpone and defer the start date a little bit, just by a couple of months. It's just about to start that program. And again, that was really the aim was to give as much of the practical element as possible and without any disruption. So that was probably the first major change that Queen's made as a response to the coronavirus pandemic. I'll just go on to the next slide, because I've mentioned the word flexibility already, I think, but if I hadn't, I guess increased flexibility is probably the theme across the reaction from Queen's and in fact from many universities in the UK towards this pandemic. But we have really had a very high degree of flexibility with regards to many different things as a result of the coronavirus situation. And so firstly, we increased the amount of English language tests that we accept, in particular adding in the Duolingo test. And that was really a response to the fact that many students were unable to take an IELTS. And in various different countries and different situations, it was becoming hard to meet the conditions, the English language conditions of an offer. And so the Duolingo test, of course, is much easier. It's much easier to do from your home, because you can do it, in the kind of comfort and safety of your own home. It's also considerably cheaper, and you get the results significantly quicker than an IELTS test. So it was really ticking a lot of boxes for students, and it enabled a lot of students to be able to then begin their program without having to take an IELTS. We also introduced a latest arrival date. So any student who started their program in September, their CAS that they received would say that their latest arrival date was the 11th of January, which is the first day of semester 2. So that meant that if they wanted to, they could take the first semester of their courses online via various different online provisions that we have, and then arrive to begin their program in January. Many students have been arriving throughout the semester, So it was never the case that we expected every student to actually wait and spend a whole semester at home studying, but they had the option if they wanted it. And that has proved to be very popular. And of course, that means that we also had to have a very strong and robust provision of online content for the programs, so that students could follow the content of their course even if they weren't physically with us. Now, for Queens, delivering content online has been something we've been doing for a long time now, for a number of years. And so when the pandemic struck and lockdown began, actually we were just increasing the provision of something we already did. So there was not too much disruption for students. And we've actually had some very, very interesting and positive feedback, in particular from international students, with regards to online lectures. And the feedback is that they feel they can contribute a bit more in the online lectures because you don't have the pressure of maybe standing up or asking questions in front of a large group of people, the majority of whom might be native English speakers. And so a lot of international students have said that they quite like the large lectures being delivered online because it allows them to participate and contribute more than they might have done in the past. So those are some of the other measures that Queens took during the last few months. Now, of course, the campus, we do expect students to arrive on campus, whether it's immediately or during the first semester. They will at some point be on campus to study with us. Our programs are not fully online. And so there have been a number of changes to our campus as well. And these changes continually are reviewed and, changes are made in accordance with, government guidance. So looking at some of the things that have happened on campus for the beginning of the term in September, there are definitely enhanced hygiene measures. So that would include things like sanitation stations for hand sanitizer. Obviously, we were giving out things like face coverings for students if they didn't have their own. There are one-way systems on campus just to make sure that there's not too much traffic in terms of people in one place. I've mentioned, obviously, the online content and the flexible teaching. There are a lot of changes that have happened in our accommodation, and I'll move on to them in a second. And I think one of the most important things is we've tried to be there to make sure that if anybody has a question, whether it's a general question or something that's very, very specific to them, there is always someone who can answer it. Even if it's before you arrive or after you arrive, you have to know that somebody's there to be able to assist you, because the situation is so fluid and changing. It's very natural that students would have questions, throughout the kind of first few months of starting their course. Now, in terms of arriving to Queens, one of the most difficult things, we put on various things like arrival services, pre-departure events, etc., help with visas. So if students have any questions, anyone who's going to start a program in January, that there are plenty of events and things that go on, or you could arrange just a one-on-one session with somebody from the international office if you have any questions you'd like to ask. Of course, the first 2 weeks for students arriving have been a little bit different this year for a lot of students to previous years, and I'm referring particularly to the quarantine. So we introduced some really nice measures, I would say, just to try to make things as easy as possible. And I think everybody is aware that things would obviously have been easier had we not had this situation, but we are trying to deal with it as it happens. And so, for example, if you take university accommodation and you're required to quarantine, those first 2 weeks would not be charged, so you wouldn't pay for them. There is a meal plan that you can take if you'd like to pay for that, to have for those 2 weeks 3 meals a day provided. But even if you don't, for the first 48 hours after your arrival, we're providing 3 meals a day, just to make sure for the first 2 days that you do have decent meals in case you're trying to acclimatize and get to know where you can buy things, how you do it online, etc. And of course, there's a residential team in the accommodation who can assist you should you have any questions. They're very easy to contact and they are available all the time. So the accommodation was somewhere where we really tried to make things as easy and as friendly as possible. Of course, a lot of the events that would happen during the first few weeks of the semester are now being done virtually. So there's quite a range of things that you can do in your accommodation during those 2 weeks, including your studying, of course, but there's lots of other events. You can get to know people and engage and participate in various different things until the time where you can then come out of your quarantine period. The other thing to note is that if students are arriving late, we will only charge a student from the time they arrive to the end of their contract. So we have not been charging students for time that they're not using their accommodation. And this is just so we want students to feel that we're trying to be as flexible as possible, knowing that if you choose to arrive after 6 weeks, let's say into the start of the semester, that's when your accommodation contract will begin. I don't know if you can see this, it maybe is a little bit small, but it was just an indication of some of the measures that have taken place in the accommodation, as a result of the pandemic, including various different things regarding cleaning. So every student would have a pack with various different cleaning products in their room when they arrive. The touch points in the common areas would be cleaned regularly every day. There are screens, of course, at the accommodation reception and things like that. So lots and lots of different things have been put in place as a result of the situation, just to try to make things as safe for students as possible. Now, I did mention obviously about the teaching. We have an approach which we have called connected learning, and initially it's a combination of face-to-face teaching and online. As a result of the current situation, a decision was made that till the end of this current semester, all delivery would be done online unless there was an absolute necessity for a component of a course to be done physically. So that could be perhaps a lab or something which just cannot be delivered online. But after December, after the Christmas holiday, when we start in January, we certainly have an expectation that there will be a physical element, a face-to-face element of teaching, but we will also have the flexibility for students if they are looking to start a program in January. They will not be required to arrive for the first day of term. They should check on their CAS to see the latest start date, but there will be a high degree of flexibility for when they can arrive. We do just ask that anyone who chooses to arrive late, they still have to follow their course from day one, so that when they do arrive, of course, they can just carry on with all the students who are already on campus. So that's really all I have to say, I guess, in terms of a very, very quick summary of how Queen's has responded and continues to respond to this current situation. I put at the end of my slide here the contact details, or you may have the details as well. But for any further questions, obviously, you can contact our partners, YouStudy, if there's anything that you'd like to know. And of course, we are still open for applicants for January. If anybody is still interested in starting a master's program in January, then you don't have a lot of time, but you still have enough time to be able to get your application in and get your documents to be starting on time. So thanks very much. And I'm happy to take any questions now, should anybody have any.